Lauren and I met at a place called Conrad Grebel University College at the University of Waterloo, where I'm from originally. And lots of amazing things about Grebel that I loved, that I still love, that I aspire to create in my own life. I'm just going to tell you about one thing, which was the chapel committee. I was a little bit of a church geek, admittedly, and we had this chapel committee that was formed of whoever wanted to be a part of it. And so often, our chapel committee was composed of a few Anglicans and Catholics and United Churchers and Mennonites and Pentecostals, all in a room, all planning worship for a Wednesday afternoon at the chapel. And when you have that kind of motley crew of people all gathered together, you can plan and do some very cool and exciting things. So one day, for example, we thought, it is midterms and students are stressed out and very few people even want to come to chapel because it's like, just one more thing to do. So we said, you know what? Let's do a spa day for God. So we pushed all the pews, the chairs aside, and we had a sand pit that you could play with, and we had a foot washing station that you could get your feet washed at, and we had a screen that had meditation and pictures on it. We did that for 45 minutes, and that was worship. Sounds pretty good, huh? Another time we thought, we have communion once a term. What if we were to fill this space, this chapel with the smell of baking bread? Somebody's like, yeah, well, I've done that before. We brought a bread maker in, we set it, so like 15 minutes before communion, the bread was done. It smells beautiful. And somebody said, well, what if we did it with grape juice? Well, you can't really bake grape juice, but what if can you even make grape juice? So somebody said, I have a juicer at home. So we brought in this little hand crank juicer, and we told stories of Jesus for communion. And as we did it, we put grapes in the grinder, in the juicer, and we made the grape juice. So I love this committee. It was very formative for me. Here's where I'm going with this. There are a couple of things that we did almost every week. And one of those things was we'd start a service off with a bowl, a singing bowl, not too unlike this one. Ours was much more beat up than this one is. It didn't quite ring as long, but we'd hit it every service to begin, and we'd wait and wait to hear that very last vibration that you can possibly hear. So singing bowls, for me, has significance, and I've been in a lot of United Churches, maybe 15 or 20 to lead services, and you're the only one that has a singing bowl. Interesting. Not only that, but it's such an important, significant symbol for me that Lauren gave me one on the day of my ordination. So, singing bowl. Okay, that's one piece. Then, prayers of the people come along in our chapel services, and we would have 3 minutes of silence. Now, I've been in a lot of United Churches, 15 or 20. I've led a lot of services, and very few have a full 3 minutes of silence. A lot of them say, we're going to have a moment of silence, and it lasts 7.5 seconds, and then it's done. I am very intrigued with you. I'm very intrigued with you. I'm intrigued by the energy that you have. Already today, the drums have been going, and the tambourines have been, I don't know, what do tambourines do? Tambourine? No, I don't know. Yeah, that. And so I'm intrigued by your energy and the way you welcomed people. I'm intrigued by this building, which I think kind of looks like it's out of New Mexico. And I don't know, it just looks like I drove up and there was a palm tree out front and it's white stucco. I thought, I'm in the wrong place. This is great. And I'm intrigued by your honesty. A lot of people, there's about 4 or 5 people who are on the search committee. I'm going to have my back to you the whole time. I'll try to remember to turn around.
We're used to your back.
Oh, goodness. So, Bob was on the search committee, and Miriam, and Alice, a couple of Dommery, and so we had lots of conversations, and I was intrigued by the questions you were asking. You're intriguing to me. I'm intrigued by the fact that your stained glass windows have the most racially correct depictions of Jesus that I've ever seen on a stained glass window. I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to journey with you. So that brings us to our texts for today. The first one was this story of Moses, right? It's a story we know pretty well. It's one of those stories that paints these vivid images in our mind, right? Moses, the shepherd, is wandering through and he sees this burning bush, this shrubbery that is not being consumed. And he stops and he looks at it. And hears a voice that says, "This is holy ground." So he takes off his flip-flops and he goes closer. And God says, and here's the important part. Like, we often get stuck up in the fire and the non-consuming bush and the fact that they're having a conversation with God. But what does God say to them? God says to Moses, "I've heard the cry of my people. I've seen what they're going through, and I want you to lead them out of slavery." Whoa. There's this really great teacher in the United States called Rob Bell. You'll hear me mention him many times. And he says, the ancient rabbis taught that the bush was always burning and that Moses just stopped long enough to take a look. I kind of get the impression that you're the kind of people that are willing to stop and take a look. We'll spend more time with the road to Emmaus. So what happens on the road to Emmaus? There are a couple of a couple of disciples, and they're walking down the street. And this stranger who they do not recognize, comes alongside them. Right? And they're talking, and they're back and forth. And this stranger says, "What are you talking about?" And the disciples say, "Are you the only people that don't know what has happened in Jerusalem these last days?" And they explain, we had this teacher, his name was Jesus. He taught all of these amazing things, and then he was handed over, he was crucified. And then it got weird because this morning some women went to the tomb and they didn't see him. So they keep walking, and Jesus says, maybe some of those things that happen match some of the scriptures that we talk about. And the disciples are thinking as they're walking, this text says their hearts are burning. They get to a home, and they invite Jesus in, and they break bread, and at that point their eyes are opened, and they realize that Jesus has always been among them. Right? No, that's okay. Now, what's really important is, in a lot of these resurrection stories, Jesus looks nothing like himself. Something traumatic happened in Sunday school. So they don't recognize Jesus. Mary, as the gardener, doesn't recognize Jesus, and now again on the road to Emmaus. And so, what happened? Why is that important? That stranger could be Jesus with hands and holes in his hands and in his feet. But it could also be any stranger, a stranger walking down the road who teaches, who hears, who breaks bread with you, and you have a glimpse of God. Okay? So it could be Jesus, but it could also be a stranger who for a moment looks a lot like Jesus. Okay. Now, I've got to say one really important caveat here before I go on. I'm going to retell this story twice. In the first retelling, it's very, very, very important that you don't think that I'm trying to call myself Jesus in this retelling. okay? That's the only thing you need to remember as I retell this story. Because I was practicing, and I was thinking, this sermon could go down as like the worst first sermon ever. If I'm not careful, like, preacher comes in, calls himself Jesus, look at me. No, that's not at all what I'm doing, okay? But I'll try to retell it in a way, and we'll retell it twice, okay? So, Chemainus United Church is walking down the road. And they're talking. They've seen glimpses of God working. They've read Scripture, and they're very curious. And this stranger, me, comes alongside them. We get into a dialogue about what Scriptures are and how God is working. And this stranger happens to have some seminary education and has happened to think about these Scriptures for a long time, and he's invited to walk alongside them for a time. And these people, all together, they break bread, and they see a glimpse of Jesus. And we can tell the exact same story and turn it around. I'm walking along the road, often quite dopily with poor posture. I'm walking down the road, and Chemainus United Church comes, strangers to me, comes, and they walk alongside. And I've heard murmurs of God and ideas, and they say, let me teach you about God. And all of you teach me amazing things about the way God is moving and working in the world. Right? Because I'm 27, and your collective experience is like 2,500 years of lived experience. Okay? I know. No, I did the math. Average age of 50 times 50, we're good. And we walk alongside each other, and I learn from you because you have so many things to teach me as well. And we will break bread together today, many times after, I'm sure. And I will see God working in you. I will see Jesus in you. Kind of technical. We'll end with this image here. It's a painting. It's the road to Emmaus. And it's different than many depictions of the road to Emmaus. They're walking down the road. Are they young or are they old? I don't know. A male or female? Kind of hard to tell. Which one is Jesus? I don't really know. Maybe an image for us as a community as we walk forward. There's a few more people on the road, but walking down the road, seeing glimpses of God working. I'm so excited for what lies ahead. So excited. Thank you for having us here. It is great and wonderful, and I'm scared to no end, and it's going to be beautiful. Amen.